From the WNIN Tri-State Public Media Center in downtown Evansville, I'm David James, and this is 2 Main Street. Well, in the not-too-distant past, before radar and satellites, folks used to rely on animals to predict the weather. The Farmer's Almanac provided helpful observations, some more practical than others. Now, before we meet my guests, here are a few of my favorite animal weather proverbs. When rabbits are fat in October and November, expect a long, cold winter, guys. And you can count the time a cricket chirps in 14 seconds, okay? Add 40 to that number, and you have the current temperature in Fahrenheit. All right, we'll have to try that one. In 1883, the U.S. Army Signal Service commissioned a guidebook to predict the weather, longer than the 24-hour period of the meteorologists of that era. Now, it seems the guidebook author, H.H.C. Dunwoody, had a high regard for cats regarding the weather. Here are a few government-approved feline weather theories from the 19th century. When cats sneeze, it's a sign of rain. When cats are snoring, foul weather follows. And cats lick table legs to signal an approaching storm. Okay, so we'll closely be watching the antics of guest number 1, Betty the Weather Cat. She's seen frequently on WFIE TV along with her fellow forecaster, guest number 2, Chief Meteorologist Jeff Lyons. And guest number 3, Tim Troutman is here. He's a warning coordination meteorologist with the National Weather Service. So welcome, guys, to 2 Main Street. And Jeff is trying to...
guest number 2 out here, David.
Guest number 1, Betty, the Weather Cat's guest number 1.
Guest number 1 is actually in her cat carrier right
now.
Oh,
hi, Betty.
So she thinks you're the veterinarian. I think it's
no,
shirt.
I'm not. Hey, I'm
either.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm cool.
Tim, if you'll do the honor, just hold that.
I'll
and
hold
just
that.
sort of
She's
peel
got a
her
little
out
bit
of
of
here.
stage fright.
Oh, hi, Betty. It's
Okay.
okay, Betty. Now, have
She,
you noticed Betty sneezing or snoring lately?
Always. I mean, you know, this cat is not over. Now we got some ice water thanks to Sarah Downs here and your production crew for accommodating the cat. And we'll see if she won't take a little drink here for a minute.
I think she's just kind of checking out the surroundings
right.
here.
She's making sure there are no, vets in the neighborhood. So.
Dogs.
Right. Veterinarians, not veterans, vets.
Of course, Betty the Weather Cat's going to be stealing the show here, this whole program. But Tim Troutman, let's get you in here. The government has come a long way, of course, in weather prediction since the Animal Guidebook in 1883. Not just a 24-hour forecast, of course, with long-range forecasts based on years of data. Is that correct, sir?
That is correct. We can pretty well forecast the weather at a very good accuracy, at least out to 7 days, and then we then from there definitely look at normals and definitely the above or below normal precipitation temperature wise. So it's really getting to the point to where we could, in the near future, with technology improving, be able to branch out a little further involving that forecast. So it's, we really focus in on that first seven days of the forecast, and that's really what's, in most cases, what's important for folks.
Well, sure. I mean, you got farmers, of course, and school officials, and everybody else checking out that 7-day forecast. Definitely.
Yeah, and definitely we do the Climate Prediction Center out of Maryland. They definitely put together a seasonal forecast, and that helps a lot of different agencies and organizations and businesses to plan ahead as they're. Transportation is a big deal, involving a lot of different freight and things like that go across the world. And having an idea of the trending over a longer period of time is really important for those industries.
Well, I think the Weather Service was first founded based on commerce in the United States, getting products from here to there safely. So now, before we talk more about Betty the Weather Cat, who's really quite photogenic, I want to learn more about this cooperation, Jeff, between the media and the National Weather Service. How's that going?
Well, we call it the Weather Enterprise, which, you might laugh, but that's actually the term that we use in the Weather Service,
really?
in the media and everything else, because you have several parts, of course. The Weather Service comprised of many, would you say thousands, if not tens of thousands, scientists and physicists, and these are the brightest brains in the country, I mean, almost without exception, who are working research to make the models work better. They're radar technicians and people that design this stuff. I just did a conference for the National Weather Association a couple weeks ago, and hearing these men and women present, it's like, here I'm sitting with a cat talking about the next 3 days. These people are doing the real hard science. But, as with everything, it's highly technical and always evolving, but it has to be communicated to, just the regular guy who just wants to know if it's going to rain or not tomorrow. Yeah. And so that's kind of how the media works into that piece. And of course, we have to be educated too in meteorology, just maybe not at the level that a lot of the National Weather Service is. But our primary job is to communicate and to do it in a way that'll hopefully draw people to listen to the message and to heed warnings and things like that. So yeah, in my experience, and of course, I've been at this 35 years, 33 here at WFIE in Evansville. And we've always been blessed with a very strong local office. Originally, of course, it was in Evansville. And then when the Weather Service modernized, kind of streamlined their operations, it moved down the road to Paducah. And we've had uninterrupted, what I would say, excellent service along the way, and quite a few characters too. Not to say everybody at the Weather Service is a stuffy, dry scientist. There are some fascinating individuals that have worked in the Weather Service and, of course, in broadcasting too.
So, Tim Trauman, how important is the media to getting the word out?
Oh, the media are absolutely the most important part of what we do. We're pretty much our number one partner other than emergency management. And, I kind of call it the warning triad, and I use that in a presentations where the media is just paramount to broadcasting the warnings and getting that vital information, that vital warning information out to the public in the matter of seconds, and having that great working relationship is just awesome and helps us to make sure that we get that warning information out to the public. That's number one. Our average warning lead time is kind of topped out nationally at about 14 minutes. So it's really important for us to work with the media to get that message out as quickly as possible, both preparedness and also during severe weather, and also just really day-to-day forecasting. We closely coordinate with Jeff and other TV meteorologists and TV stations, radio stations, and different folks involving the daily grind of forecasting the weather. We have a chat program known as NWS Chat that we can feed that information to them behind the scenes. So if Jeff is on air going with wall-to-wall coverage, he probably has a little monitor off to the side, and he can look at the chat and say, hey, the National Weather Service in Paducah, they're about to issue a tornado warning, so be prepared in the next few seconds. If you're in this area, be prepared that this tornado warning probably will be coming out, and we'll be giving you more information as it's occurring. So that just working together gives as much of a heads up as we can give to the public, and that's what it's all about.
And I was amazed. I went down to the Paducah office. I've been there several times, and when you walk in to the what they call the forecast floor, right? So they have all the different forecasters, men and women down there working, and but up on the wall, it's like a newsroom. They have 4 or 5 monitors, and they're watching the coverage coming in from the media. And in this case, it would be the Paducah TV stations in Evansville, to make sure that, okay, well, we put a warning out, okay, it's on all 3 or wherever it happens to be. I think there's a misconception that somehow we're competitors, the TV station's trying to beat the Weather Service or vice versa, and that's not true at all. We're working together. We're on the same team. We want everybody to be safe and to heed the warnings, and so it works best when we work together, and we want a unified message. You don't want to have, one station saying, well, there's a tornado warning, and the other one saying, nah, it's not so bad. It's got to be consistent. I mean, we've seen that with other things, in life here recently, misinformation and so forth. And I think the Weather Service, the weather enterprise with the media, is one really shining example of how a unified message has the greatest impact and causes the greatest number of people to be safe.
And we also have trained weather spotters all across
yes.
the tri-state that are really on it.
They are. The cooperative observers are kind of the backbone of weather observations, because we have the radar, which can estimate rainfall and things like that, and wind speeds and so forth. But there's nothing that compares to a person with good instruments.
I know it's very important. These spotters, they confirm what we see on radar.
They do. There's nothing that will beat the human eye and the human brain in ascertaining what the weather is.
Looks like there's a strong storm over Boonville.
Yeah.
But if somebody in Boonville can say, "You're right, Jeff," or "You're wrong."
Yeah, they say, "No, it's not in Boonville. It's
No,
Tacoma
it's in
Springs."
Chandler.
Yeah, right.
Right.
And I think there's a misconception that to be a storm spotter, you have to, people watch all this stuff on, TV with the chasers, driving through the plains at 100 miles an hour.
Twister.
But you don't have to do, you don't have to do any of that. You can, if you have a good set of instruments in your backyard and a good place, whether it's your window or a place just to view the sky, and you've been trained. That's the important thing. I mean, anytime we get thunderstorms, we get a bunch of, there's a funnel cloud here or there, and oftentimes that's not the case. So you do want to have some training, before you're making your reports. And the Weather Service, they kind of have a security protocol where the spotters who have been trained and certified have a secret number or some kind of credential, so that when they call in their report, they know it's the real thing. So that's good to know. It's kind of like when we used to have school closings in the newsroom, and you'd have a squeaky voiced kid get on. "This is, such and such high school. We're going to be off tomorrow."
Wasn't it?
It might have been me back in the day. Who knows? So yeah, we want the information to be true and accurate when it goes out.
Now, as weather consumers, we rely on these forecasts based on the latest technology, of course, and the expertise of trained meteorologists. But sometimes Mother Nature does throw us a curveball and surprises everybody. Has that happened before? Tim Troutman?
Well, weather is an inexact science, if that's the buzzword we want to talk about today. And, even though we have the best technology in the world, in the U.S. here with the National Weather Service, it's still, we're still not to 100% accuracy with any of the technology. So it's the important part of collaborating with the media, finding out what they're thinking about an event, also getting those spotter reports, also working together with emergency management in the counties, and also just making sure that we learn from events that we may not do so well on, so the next time we can get better. That's the objective, is to get as close as we can to 100% accuracy. So, just looking at our statistics, we're definitely over about 90+% accurate involving our forecast now, and that's a huge difference from when I started on September 11th, 1989. So it's definitely an improvement.
I started in '86, and at that point, there were models, of course, but man, it was always a coin toss, and which model to go with and so forth. But now, it's gotten to the point where there are so many models, and very good ones and very high resolution. And now the Weather Service is actually using what they call the national blend of models. So they take all the models and then they churn those together. And that's why you see these hurricane forecasts that are so uncannily accurate 5 and 6 days out. Not to say it's exact, but it's within 20, 30 miles. The Ida, when it came into New Orleans or into Louisiana, that was very well forecast several days out. I mean, 4 or 5 days. And, that gives emergency managers and the public time, hopefully, to react. You were talking about unexpected things. So one thing that Ida did, and that a lot of hurricanes are doing now, is when they get close to the shore, the water's a lot warmer, especially in the Gulf, and they rapidly intensify. So it'll be like a Category 2 out in the open water, and then in a couple of days, or not even a couple of days, within 12 hours, it could go Category 4, which is very hard to predict.
And we were looking at that, the water temperatures were kind of where it was a Category 2, maybe around 80.
Yeah.
And then when we knew once it got into the mid-80s water, closer to the shore, upper 80s water, oh boy, it was going to be, just a rapid intensity increase. And those those type of events, we just hate that it happens, but we were fortunate to be able to forecast it at the National Hurricane Center level down to the local offices that were affected there. So,
well, I've got a question for you guys. When I see all these forecasts of these hurricanes, you see the little swirls out on the maps and everything. Talk about the European model. Was that coming from Brussels? What does that mean, the European model?
Well, it's you want to answer that one?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, there are basically two models. I mean, there are many, but the two big ones that you hear a lot about are the American model, or the GFS, which is the global fluid forecast system. Yeah, and then within that you have several subsets and different models. And then in Europe you have the same thing, the UK Met model, and I don't know where they base it. It's out of England. Yeah, but these are global scale models, so they can look at data points all over the globe, and that's how they figure out what's going on or what may go on down the road. And there often will be a disparity between the European and the GFS. And of course, in our culture of kind of horse race mentality, it has to be A or B. Which one are you going for? And there are some events where the European does well. There are many that the GFS does well. And you have to look at both and kind of consider how they've done up to that point. I think one thing, another misconception is people think we just kind of look at a model that day and, it's going to rain tomorrow. But the fact is you look backwards and forwards to see how it performed and also what kind of data it started out with. We call that the initialization. So when the model runs, let's say at 6 o'clock in the morning, it looks at all the temperatures and pressures around the globe, both from airport observations and different places. And then it crunches it into this computer, a huge computer, and they run it. And then it kicks out the weather at either 1 or 3 hour increments for any point, see? And so then you can figure out your forecast based on that. So as the data gets better and they use airplanes, just regular passenger planes, have equipment on them so that when they go up into the atmosphere, they send back, instead of a weather balloon every so often, you have all this data. You have a huge, rich mesh of data that goes in. So the better the data starting out, the better the model can be on the other end. Did I get all that right?
Yes, you did.
I've been talking way too much.
I've been taking notes over here.
Not only do we look at what Jeff just mentioned involving the model tendencies, but we also, from our experience level of working for several years in the office, we know that maybe the GFS model is typically slower or faster with a certain type of weather system or a certain time of the year. It operates better, involving snowstorms or and so forth. So we take all that into play, and the other part of that I wanted to mention too is the main key to our forecast models still, and they've been released since the 1930s, are the upper air weather balloons. We released those at over 80 locations across the country, and all that data, when we release the weather balloon, it has what's called a radiosonde instrument. If you can picture it, it's a little square box, and we turn on the computer within the radiosonde. It's a little small computer, and it emits a signal down to the ground station there, and we collect the data as the balloon moves up into the atmosphere up into about 70,000 feet. So that balloon, it expands and gets probably about the size of a vehicle before it pops. And it usually takes about an hour or so for the balloon to launch and go through the whole process. And we collect the temperature, the dew point temperature, the humidity, the wind speed, direction of the wind, the pressure in the atmosphere. All that data flows back to our office. And all 80 offices or so that do release the balloons, all that data goes to one big supercomputer in Maryland. Well, this supercomputer has what I would say a long math problem inside the computer, which we call a model, which is what we were talking about. And all that data flows through the model, and it spits out forecast weather maps. So we typically look at about 4 or 5 different types of models most of the time, and we know from experience, well, this model usually handles things pretty good with this type of scenario or the first 12 hours of the forecast, which gets into the blended models. Now we've really gone that direction, and involving the 1 hour forecast that we do all the way out to 7 days now, that it definitely has improved, I feel, the accuracy.
And there's computer horsepower to do that. Now it's possible because of the sheer number of data and data that's been collected over the years that you can look at analogs, right? In other words, if the map looks a certain way today, you can plug that in, and the computer, the system will kick out what we call analogs, similar weather events and how they played out. So like if I look at the map today and it says, oh yeah, and it's unbelievable. The system can, I don't know how far the analogs go back. It's like at least 1950s, right?
Yeah,
okay.
About 1950s.
So basically some poor group had to input all the surface maps that were hand analyzed back then into the system. But essentially what it does is you say, okay, here's what the weather map looks like today. And then the model will say, okay, well, the last 4 times or 5 times it looked like this were, 1963, 1948, 1999, and this is what happened. Then you can start with that and see, okay, well, did the low generate snow in that one? And that gives you confidence because, like Tim said, if you forecast a long time, you remember these things. But as we all know, our phone can remember a lot more when you plug stuff in the computer, in the calendar and so forth. So by looking at the analog, you at least have an idea of, well, how did this play out before? Doesn't always work, but it's often close.
It's often pretty close.
History rhymes if it doesn't repeat itself.
Yeah, the St. Louis University, they collected a lot of the severe weather analogs. So we actually, for about 12 or so years now at the Weather Service, we've been using these severe weather analogs in advance of expected severe weather outbreaks to give us an idea. Well, with these type of conditions, the wind speeds moving across the country at this speed, the amount of moisture, the strength of this cold front coming in, what's it going to compare to in the past? And one good example was when I was working as a warning coordination meteorologist at the Morristown, Tennessee office in East Tennessee. We took a look at the analogs around April 27th, 2011, and it compared favorably to the April 3rd, 74 super outbreak. And I hate to say it, verified.
Yeah. That was, of course, the Dixie outbreak or the Deep South, super outbreak too.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting, Tim, that you're based in Henderson, Kentucky, but you provide weather forecasts for Wyoming.
Yes.
How does that work?
Well, I've been able to telework with things that have been going on lately with COVID, so it's really been a blessing to be back in the tri-state. I have to put on my Wyoming hat every morning and forecast and help out the office and do what I would normally do administratively from Henderson. So it's been a blessing. I've got some elderly parents too, so it's been really good to be back in the tri-state area. I've been away from here as long as I was here. So out
so
of
you
my
grew
50,
up in this area?
I grew up in Henderson County and really was interested in weather after the April 3rd, 74 outbreak. Unfortunately, that event kind of opened my eyes about tornadoes and in 1978 the blizzard and watching Marcia and old Double L Young, Lloyd Lindsey Young back in those days. Their zany weather and the professor they all kind of got me interested more in weather, and I wanted to do TV weather, but it just didn't work out that way. I was it's odd how you meet people in your life, and they kind of direct you in certain areas. And I ended up meeting someone that I worked with in a summer job, and they introduced me to Norm Carroll, who was the meteorologist in charge of the Evansville National Weather Service office at the time. And we got together, and he met with me, and I was doing a class at Western Kentucky University that I got credit for by volunteering at the Weather Service. I was able to, from there, they had an opening, and I was able to get on at the Weather Service. I had a choice between doing weekend weather maybe in Bowling Green, Kentucky versus government job, and I kind of weighed all that, benefits and things like that. So I thought, well, and it was closer to home, so that's why I started out at the Evansville National Weather Service office.
So, Jeff, before Betty, there was an animated weather dog, right?
Well, that's right. And I should point out that the only reason that Betty is here today is because you wanted her here. And you're a critter guy. I love animal stories on the news. And I remember, of course, the TV station was close to the Humane Society for many years. And we would often have these dogs and cats that were dropped at the station in error, and
I think on purpose.
You were not a cat person initially. Do you remember? And
probably not. I have a cat now.
I know you do.
Cats
right.
now.
And somebody dropped a cat off, and it was close to Christmas, and we had a tray. Some lady had brought us bourbon balls in the news department, and you tried to give the cat a bourbon ball. So you had kindness in your heart way back for feline.
I don't remember that.
Well, we can edit that out. But and I think the cat went home with you eventually. I think your daughter caught wind of it. And,
that's a vague memory. I probably tried to erase that memory.
That's right.
Bourbon balls to the cat.
Well, a cat didn't eat them. If that's,
good.
If
that's
a
good thing.
Right.
That could go really wrong.
Can't say the same for the news department.
Well, tell us about Scuffy.
Yes, let's. So when we were working together, way back, we had a computer system at work that was intended to do the weather maps and everything, but you could draw cartoons on it if you wanted. And I don't really remember how or why it started, but you typically would end the newscast with kind of a funny story, the kicker.
Yes.
And oftentimes you kind of lean toward an animal story. The water skiing squirrel would be the classic example, but we've had many
Still
others.
is the classic
example. Exactly. And so anyway, I drew this dog, and I named it Scuffy. We used to have neighbors had a dog named Scuffy when I was a kid, and always go through the trash, our trash.
Not Scruffy.
No, not Scruffy. Scuffy, Scuffy. So anyway, I drew this dog, and then Scuffy would get into different, situations, and they didn't end well. Oftentimes, it was very unflattering for the TV station that we worked at.
I remember those.
But nobody seemed to notice, so it was like it just empowered me. And you egged me on, and I would just, draw these things. I had a picture of the TV station and kind of this, sewage pipe coming out into a lake and Scuffy swimming around in it, and nobody you noticed. Of course, you would just chuckle. And anyway, we were getting away with that, and
didn't Scuffy turn into like a skeleton which was in the lake?
Scuffy did many things, part of organized crime and whatnot. Usually, it was tied into whatever the story was that you ended with. Well, anyway, then fast forward to the pandemic, and I'm doing the weather in my dining room with a chroma key screen and computers and everything, and we were in a break before we went on, and Betty here climbed up on the dining room table because there were lights on. She thought there was food probably, and I picked her up. And so the director said, "Oh, a cat. Put the cat on." I said, "No." I said, "If we put the cat on, then I have to always put the cat on." "Oh, come on, please." Okay. So I put the cat on. Well, then, and I posted a picture of it. I said, "Well, Betty." And I christened her Betty the Weather Cat. I thought, well, that's not very original, but, we'll see what happens.
Well, how'd you get the name Betty?
She's named after my Aunt Betty, who was a real character, lived in Terre Haute when I worked my first job there. And Aunt Betty, we could do a whole 2 Main Street on Aunt Betty, but we don't have time or resources. But anyway, I posted this picture of me holding Betty in front of the weather map, and the darn thing went viral. And like 2 days later, it was on the Today Show, and of course I didn't see any of this stuff. And then my daughter's calling from IU saying, she was home, actually, nobody was anywhere. And then it just took off. And we did an interview with the New York Times, and all these animal reporters came out of the woodwork, doing stories on Betty the Weather Cat. RT, the Russian Times, even wanted I didn't grant them an interview. They were the only one I stiffed because I thought, I don't know about this. And
we got some watch list.
The magazine Catster called up. Catster, yeah. You don't subscribe?
No, I haven't heard of that one.
No, I hadn't either, but they were wonderful people to talk to. The funny thing was all the reporters who were assigned the cat beat, would tell me their cat story. Oh, I have a cat named Myrtle, and Myrtle loves to sit in the sun, and I'm thinking, well, that's great, but I got to, move along here, And so, and we did Skype interviews with Betty, and then I'd put her on the weather every night, at 10 o'clock. And she had like a little throne I built over there for her so she could sit and watch me do the weather. And people just seem to like it for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
So now she's pretty much just on my social media on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And but she does have a following. There were people from all continents, all around the world that follow Betty.
Mm-hmm.
And my daughter, seeing dollar signs, because it's her cat, she's like, how can we monetize this? And I said, look, I can't get into the cat making money business. I'm already a commercial broadcaster. So she started an Instagram account for Betty. Betty has 11,000 followers.
Betty.
And so my daughter Natalie writes it in the person of Betty. So it would be, what was Betty thinking? So the little captions will say, Dad's coming in with tuna for me. I hope he's not late, that kind of stuff. And, but my daughter has taken a zillion pictures of me with this cat that I didn't know about, and they show up, going all over. I'm like, in my shorts coming out of the shower, and it's like you really need to use some discretion. So, but it's been a fun adventure.
Oh,
and,
yeah. We really enjoy
unforeseen
Betty's presence here. I think she wants to get down and roam a little bit.
Well, she likes her camera time too. So,
well, that's true.
But now that we've done our thing, I hate to take away from the gravity of this interview with a cat, hanging out here.
I knew we were going to be upstaged by the cat anyway. That's a given.
Without question.
So, Tim, anything that gets people involved in the weather, you're gung ho for that.
I'm all for it, and that's what we want. We want folks to keep abreast of the weather,
and we have those winter tornadoes, which are, boy, those are nasty.
Yeah, November 6th, of course, is the big one that everybody remembers, and that was, in many ways, surprising. I mean, we knew the atmosphere was set up for thunderstorms, and maybe a couple severe, and then a tornado possible, but no one could have foreseen what actually turned up.
No, a strong EF3, 41-mile track. Unfortunately, 24 deaths, 238 injuries. It's very unfortunate. But just a testament. We worked closely with the media to get the warnings out, and had really good warning lead times. It was just that time of the morning.
We were hobbled. 2 o'clock in the morning. You don't have a lot of people at that time who had weather radios that would wake them up. Phone apps really hadn't developed where they would alert you in the same way that we think of now. And ironically, it was one of two tornadoes, I think, in the country on that particular event. The one, of course, that went through the southeast Vanderburgh County in Newburgh. Sure. There was another one in Webster or...
kind of the Henderson-Webster
Yeah, it was right there south,
mm-hmm.
but it went through a rural area, so there was very low impact. And, if this tornado had even shifted 2 or 3 miles south, it would have just been, some trees down and maybe a few injuries. But the fact that it hit a mobile home community was devastating.
Yeah, and then you had the other event on November 15th down there in Hopkins County, where if you're a sports fan and a Kentucky basketball fan, Frank Ramsey's home was destroyed. He was very fortunate to make it through that event relatively unscathed. That was another significant. That was actually an EF4 tornado.
It was the strongest tornado in the country that year, and it came. There was November 6th, and then the 15th. So just 9 days later, and that was an odd. Of all the severe weather days, we literally stayed at the station 24 hours. We had people asleep there because weather got Byron and at that time Chad Seawich. Because we had to be covered because stuff just kept happening. It would be it kind of calmed down for a little bit, and then wham, you would get warning, and we were just on the heels of November 6th, so people were already at a heightened worry level, which in many ways may have made the November 15th storm less. I won't say impactful, but certainly no fatalities and very few injuries because people were so tuned into the weather, so to speak. They shut school down early, and everybody did the right things. Not that they didn't on the 6th. It's just the situational awareness of what might happen was much higher for the 15th.
Yeah, my wife's home. She was my fiance at the time. She was on the periphery of that tornado, and just on the outer edge of it, there was a branch that was a large limb. It was at least about 2 to 3 feet wide. It was jammed at least 5 feet into the ground.
Yeah.
And it took me about 2 hours to dig it out, which is just incredible, the power and the strength of those winds nearing 200 miles an hour.
They found, this is, again, the Hopkins County tornado. They found signs from the Pennyroyal Parkway, like, exit or road sign, like, was it 22 or 3 miles away?
Yeah.
So, these huge metal signs had just gone, and even... that's not uncommon. When we had a tornado in Harrisburg in Illinois, and that was a strong one too, 3 or 4, EF 3 or 4, and we found canceled checks from the Harrisburg, Bank and Trust in Newburgh. So, and that's about 90 miles, air miles, give or take, maybe a little less than that.
Now, I know when there's a tornado warning, when I was working at Channel 14, you would stay on the air until that warning expired.
Right, and hopefully you were on a little bit before, leading up.
Well, usually it's a tornado
heads
watch, and then it becomes a warning.
Right.
You're prepared as you watch it move across the map.
Right.
So is that an established policy for all television stations then, to stay on the air?
No.
I can let maybe you speak to that one, but
it's.
I didn't know if you had any guidance from the Weather Service on that, or is that just up to the station?
It's really up to the TV station. But the important thing that folks need to further understand is a tornado watch means conditions are favorable for severe weather, including definitely tornadoes, in the next maybe 3 to 6 hours within that watch area. A watch means get ready and get set, means keep a closer watch to the weather. And then when we are in the tornado watch, at the Weather Service, we're bringing in extra people into the operations area, getting ready for the event, calling up the storm spotters, activating the spotter network, getting on chat, really starting to collaborate more about, we're expecting the storms to erupt during this time period, and then as the storms are taking off and beginning to occur, then we're trying to give updates to the media on the NWS chat and also, via social media. And then, of course, when the warning is issued, that means go to your safe place. Have a predetermined safe place. That's what I can definitely tell everyone right now. Go to the Weather Service website, local media, Red Cross. There's a lot of good information on those websites involving where to go, what to do. Obviously in your home, the best place to move to is, if you have a basement, that's obviously the best place. If you don't have a basement, move to your most interior area of your home. You want as many walls between you and the high winds as possible. A hallway, a bathroom, cover your head. Most injuries are head-related due to flying debris. And, if you're driving, as a lot of us are in the main part of the afternoon, getting off of work, and however, because in a lot of cases tornadoes occur during the time of the heated part of the day, usually that 4 to 5 p.m., 6 p.m. time period. So, if you're driving along, a tornado warning is issued or a tornado is spotted, I'd like to challenge everyone right now, find 3 or 4 or 5 locations along your normal route home to get off the road at a moment's notice. Look for it now, and not when the event is occurring. If you see a tornado, get off that road and move to a more sturdy building and try to ride it out at that point, because you're already in a bad spot.
That's some great advice right there.
And you would ask about wall-to-wall coverage being is that required? The FCC only requires that we pass along emergency information. That can be in the form of the crawl at the bottom of the screen or whatever. And it really grew out of, I think, competition in different TV markets, because weather is a key, audience driver. People tune in to watch the weather, and you need to be on with severe weather, for your station to really serve the public. But just by comparison, when I was very new at Channel 14 in 1990, June the 2nd, we had a major tornado that came across, a series of them actually, that came across Illinois. This is a Petersburg tornado, and Mount Carmel and Albion and Browns.
I was there.
Yeah, you were there. You were running the radar in the
working,
forecast
yeah.
office. And it was the biggest outbreak in Indiana since 1974, I would imagine. Yeah,
it sure was.
Were there 34, 35 tornadoes statewide?
Yes.
But long track tornado. And we only did cut-ins. I broke in, this is Saturday night, and, you would say, well, there's a tornado moving in. And we had the radar and everything. And then, you'd kind of say your piece, and then we now join Punky Brewster in progress. And then they'd go back. And we wound up staying. I mean, the cut-ins got longer and longer. It was like ridiculous. Plus, nobody could follow the plot line on Blossom. If we blacked out 28 minutes of it. So finally, we just kind of evolved into that. Well, do they want to see an entertainment show, or do they want to see the weather? And 9 times out of 10, they want to see the weather. Now, don't ask me that question if the Indianapolis 500, the Kentucky Derby's on, the Game 7 of the NBA or whatever, or the Voice. We do get a lot of pushback from people who are not affected, because remember, we cover 100 miles, top to bottom, east to west, and we can have, a major weather event going on, let's say in Pike County, Petersburg or Princeton and Gibson County, and the sun shining in Owensboro, and those people want to watch whatever was scheduled, and we have to say we have to be here for all the viewers, and that's usually I find cooler heads prevail, so I never answer those emails day of because they can be vicious. And you wait a day or two, and then you just write back and say, hey, thanks, I understand your frustration, but we got to do what we got to do. And they'll say, well, I was just mad at that time.
Well, once they see the damage from a storm, the next day they realize, hey, this was really serious. This should have been my hometown.
Yeah.
That's right.
Now, of course, Betty is stealing the show as usual.
Yeah,
the National Weather Service dates back to 1870 when President Ulysses Grant signed into law the creation of a new National Weather Service within the U.S. Army Signal Service. Weather data, of course, had been collected via telegraph from weather observers around the country. And even Thomas Jefferson recorded the temperature. He got a thermometer, I understand. He recorded the temperature on Independence Day, July 4th, 1776, and the high temperature, of course, was 76 degrees, of course.
What else?
Why not? Of course, George Washington was an avid weather observer. He kept a diary, and I think his last weather observation was the day before he died.
Yes,
so George Washington.
And Benjamin Franklin also
was
into that.
James Madison also.
I read a book. It was called The Storm Kings, I believe. And it had to do with, in that period, the first tornado chasers. Of course, they didn't know what it was in the 1700s, and they called it a whirl. And these guys were on horseback tracing a storm and, and reporting back. And I want to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I probably am, but I thought that Benjamin Franklin may have tried to do what we call a surface analysis, where you would get weather information from several points, and then you plot it. So you connect like temperatures and pressures. So when you get the finished map, if you have enough observation points, you get the isobars and the, kind of like what Marcia used to draw, but it would have been very rudimentary. And of course, these observations were sent by horseback and carrier pigeon and smoke signals, so it wasn't real immediate, but they were able to forecast, backcast, because they had to look at it and say, oh, well, that's why it rained, because we had this, that, and the other going on.
Of course, they were 100% right. They could postcast.
I know. Yeah, postcast. That's the word I'm looking for.
Like it.
But people will still ask today, why I don't draw the isobars like Marcia used to. And I said, well, they're on there. I said, I don't use a magic marker, and but her maps are really a work of art. I mean, she would transcribe or copy the surface map And if you were just looking at it, if you're a weather person, you look at it, you're like, wow, she got away with that on TV? Because, the people, consultants and management, they're terrified of any kind of, anything other than pretty color.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that leads us into Tim Troutman's research into the local weather icon, the late Marcia Yockey. She worked for the National Weather Service before beginning her TV weather career at both WTVW and WFIE in Evansville. So, Tim, you've been, I guess, talking to a lot of folks, and what have you learned about those early years in your project?
Well, she was basically attending college at the University of Evansville, studying to be a chemist, and she evidently saw there was an advertisement in the newspaper that the U.S. Weather Bureau is seeking female observers, and it was during World War II. So there, during that time period, a lot of the male federal workers were either transferred within the Weather Bureau to Washington, D.C., different other areas, Europe, Pacific, and they needed people. So the Weather Bureau, put that notice out. Marcia applied. Was hired. She completed her weather training in Chicago, and then from there, that was in sometime between the fall of 1943 to early 1944, and then that was about a 6-month training class, and she made it back and worked at the Evansville office here at the very close to where the old National Weather Service office was at Dress Regional Airport, just within less than a half a mile from there. And at that time, the Weather Bureau had 2 offices. They had an office downtown on Vine and at the U.S. Post Office there, and also the little observers location there at the airport. And she worked there until they consolidated the office about 1950. And then at that point, she made it past World War II time frame when all the the soldiers and the displaced Weather Bureau employees came back. They kept her, and she and another lady worked there until the early 50s. And in 1952, she was transferred out to the Weather Bureau office in Grand Island, Nebraska. And then at that point, she got her pilot's license and wanted to obviously come back home because she was from here in Evansville, and she would fly back frequently of course, without instrument flight rules and all that good stuff. She was a daredevil, I tell you.
I've flown with her. I can tell stories about that.
Water towers
you
landmarks.
Navigate by water towers.
And I may have this a little bit wrong, but I'm going to try to give you the best that I can to get her toward the transition to TV. Evidently, the family or somehow she connected with a congressman or something like that.
Ed Mitchell, right?
Ed Mitchell. And then he let her know that there was going to be an opening, and they were opening WFIE TV. And from there, she transitioned out of the Weather Bureau to doing TV weather. And the reason I really like this project, too, is even though she moved over to TV and she was in the media from then on, she always remembered her roots back to the Weather Bureau, and she would come out to I was told, and I interviewed Ernie Block, who's still living. I interviewed Sylvia Niemeyer, also about Marcia and the project, and of course you, David, and others, and. Haven't got to you, Jeff, yet, but anyhow,
I've given you a lot of information, old film clips and stuff. So,
that's been very, very much appreciated. And she would come out to the Weather Service office every evening for years and years. And sometimes I was told she would spend as many as 2 or 3 hours out there just poring over the weather maps, asking the meteorologist at the Weather Service, well, what do you think about this? And this is what I'm thinking. And they would kind of work together to put together the best forecast that they could find and put together for the area. And from what you had told me and others had told me, she would stay out there a lot of times till about 9:45 and then rush to the TV station and get there just in time to get her map done. And when she was out there at the Weather Bureau or Weather Service office, she had a smaller map that she would take with her, and she would annotate all that information, then bring it back and put it on the big map on the board. And just having that close working relationship with the Weather Service, I think, was important to her success because we were basically providing the official forecast, and she helped us too because she had quite a bit of knowledge working 10 years in the Weather Bureau too,
and being a pilot
she loved
too.
it. And the pilot, yeah,
yes.
she loved what she did.
Mm-hmm. So what are you doing with this information?
Okay, as part of the National Weather Service's Heritage Program, that's what kind of tuned me into Marcia, because somewhere in the back of my mind I remembered that she had worked for the Weather Bureau, and I thought, this would be a great local project to do to kind of highlight that part of her career that, even though we've talked about it a little bit, there's a lot more to it that I found as I've been going through this. And it'll probably be about a 15, 20 minutes of a documentary. And I'm going to put that together through the next 3 or 4 weeks now that I've got some other projects out of the way. And I look forward to unveiling it and so that everyone can learn a little bit more about the Yak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we kind of grew up, I guess, on the shoulders of Marcia Yaki. I know I started my career next to Marcia, introducing her at the Weather Map, and people watched Marcia and didn't watch me, so that's how I was introduced to the market.
Rode the coattails.
And then you kind of came in on the
same thing. She retired, and then that was the opening that eventually became mine. It wasn't direct. I started on the midday and did other things, and I had seen Marcia, when I was a kid. Of course, we all watched. I say we all, but I don't know anybody that didn't watch Marcia's Weather. We looked at the other. There was a guy with a ventriloquist.
Well, she kind of set the tone too for
it
weathercasters.
Was like, it's okay. It's going to be crazy. And everybody has a Marcia story, and mine was. My dad used to do Sunday drives, loved to drive us. Everybody in the car, we're going to go for a ride. And we drove through Newburgh, and here comes Marcia the other way, riding her bike along the river there on Water Street. But she's wearing, they look like those things like the Red Baron wore, like aviator, goggles. And it had to be Marcia. Well, my dad, said, "Hey, Marcia, how's the weather?" And she said, who knows what she said? She whizzed by. But then that night we turned on the weather at 10 o'clock on Sunday night, and of course she talked about it. I was out today in Newburgh. Some guy asked me, "How's the weather going to be?" And my dad, that was me. That was us. That was who knows how many people she saw that day. But and that was the first time I had seen her, and she came to my school when I was about 4th, 5th grade, and then I actually got to meet her and work with her a couple times. We did telethons together after I was working at the station. She was retired, and she couldn't have been nicer. She was salty. There was an edge. She definitely.
She'd tell you what she thought.
But she really, she was just. So unique, and I know that's a cliche.
Well, what's the classic line you still hear?
Marcia knew her weather. No matter what, what I'll ever do in 35 years. I've been on longer than she was, but it doesn't matter. You never get out of that shadow, which is fine. But they'll say, well, especially if you miss a forecast, well, Marcia didn't have that problem. She only had a magic marker, and Marcia knew her weather. She knew her weather. And, if I had $1 for every time I heard that. But like David, I owe a lot to Marcia because I am convinced that she's the reason that 14, ascended in viewership. And it became kind of a legacy station. People watch that channel for the crazy people on there. And I don't say that, I guess crazy is not the right word, but the people on there were always personalities. Yeah. It wasn't just dry, weather and news and sports and so forth. The people had personalities you could identify with.
I think the theme that I've gathered by doing this documentary is the entertainment part of it, and she gave you a good forecast to the best of her judgment.
She slipped that forecast in there.
Well, she knew her weather, but and she was always at things. They would. they'd have an event at Washington Square Mall, and she'd be like the Grand Marshal. She used to go to the Wendell Foster Center every Valentine's Day in Owensboro, and
Very selfless
with the
person.
disabled individuals over there. And so she had a lot of causes that were close. And she was a good person, and that just came through. But
that's further come through in the documentary too.
Yeah.
How selfless and caring and she would just if anyone asked her to do something, she'd do it, and that's just how she was.
Yeah.
It was really a
And
it was
not-
really a blessing to hear all that.
Yeah, and not really maybe not self-aware, but she I don't think she was in it to promote herself or her, quote unquote brand, to use a current term. She would have blanched it. You say, "Oh, it's the Marcia brand." But she was, of all the people that have worked in broadcasting in the Evansville market, she's always going to be on the top as the person who really kind of struck a tone, and one word, you know who it is,
All righty.
Alrighty. Tim wanted an alrighty clip of her just saying alrighty, because she said that every time she started. Well, I thought she said it every time she started.
I found it.
Oh,
the
good.
4th of July, 1984. And she was dressed up in a one-piece.
I know the one.
Bathing suit with a bow tie when she said that. That's going to be in there.
Okay, good. Yeah, she always used to jump in the river or a lake on the 4th of July,
She did.
which I think she wanted to do the year she retired. I think they finally said, maybe not this year, and then she decided maybe she was done.
That's another story.
That is.
Hey, guys, this has been a real treat for me, and I know for our listeners and viewers. My guests have been Tim Troutman, the warning coordination meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and Jeff Lyons, chief meteorologist at WFIE-TV, and his famous feline, Betty the Weather Cat, who is somewhere under the table probably right now, but she has been very well behaved.
Well, she has. She's right down here. Come here.
Betty, thank you very much for being on the show. I'm David.
Okay.
There's Betty. I'm David James, and this is 2 Main Street, presented by Jeffrey Berger of Berger Wealth Services at Bayard Private Wealth Management.